Good evening and welcome to the 7 Stages of Distraction Denial, Part 1. This is Bob Ragazzo. I'll be your facilitator for this evening, and welcome. So let's get started. This is my bio, and this is my smiling face up in the right-hand corner. I'm always smiling when I get a chance to share safe driving tips with fine people like yourselves. I am a certified defensive driving instructor and founder of 2 online driver training companies. One is the nonprofit Parents Coalition to Stop Teen Driving Deaths Now, which is pretty self-explanatory. And our other is the corporate or fleet driver training company called Collision Avoidance Technology and Training, LLC. For those of you not familiar with the term fleet, a fleet driver is anyone that drives for their occupation. So we train sales reps, customer service folks, techs, delivery people on everything from passenger cars to vans to straight trucks, all the way up to 18-wheelers. Most importantly, though, I am the concerned father of 2 young drivers who are very highly trained and very good safe drivers, I'm pleased to say. So my bio is I train thousands of drivers each year, both experienced and inexperienced, and I've authored several hundred articles on driver training and also several ebooks. I've been featured on network news shows from Florida to California, and I have been and continue to be a guest driving expert on radio stations all across the US and Canada. And the roots of my passion for this and my story is when I was 16, 4 of my friends piled into a Chevy Impala, which was almost like a parade float, big steel and glass vehicle. My friend Bob Barry was driving. He lived up the street from me. They were riding on Kennedy Boulevard, which is a wide street in Jersey City. It's where I grew up. It's got a 40-mile-an-hour speed limit. People frequently do 60 or 70 on it, and it's got a lot of hairpin turns. My father used to refer to this as the acid test for new drivers, and it's really unclear if anyone was wearing a seatbelt, although no one of the 4 passengers were ejected. That's usually an indication that they weren't wearing seatbelts. So it's an indication that they probably were belted because they did not get ejected. They were probably all horsing around and distracting the driver, as young people especially will tend to do, thinking that for some reason it's not affecting them. So this is one of the foolish things that we all grow up with. Unfortunately, my friend didn't pass the test. This is a reenactment. They hit a wooden telephone pole, and despite the fact that car was made mostly of steel back then, it wrapped around similar to something like this and didn't even leave a dent in that pole. I'll just never forget the details of this. Nobody walked away. My friend passed away a couple hours later. He was driving. My other good friend was in the front seat. He died instantly. And I remember that to this day. And the 2 guys in the back, I believe, survived the crash. I don't know if they survived their injuries. All in all, it was a very ugly scene. But I want to give special thanks to the Berkeley Heights Police Community Policing Unit and Sergeant William Fettis, we call him Trent, for facilitating the webinar presentation. Also, special thanks to our friends at Solera eDriving for making their extensive and very expensive research available to us. Now, before I talk about the 7 stages of distraction denial, I want to talk about the 3 types of distraction. Number 1 is eyes off the road, right? And number 2 is hands off the wheel. And number 3, and the worst of all, is cognitive distraction. That's taking your mind off what you're doing. So when you're talking on the phone, texting, emailing, DMing, taking selfies, whatever, you're incorporating all 3 of these. It's a triple threat. But this is not about lecturing. We're all subject to distraction. We're all subject to being extremely busy. Everyone's busy. My little friend here with the bad attitude, it kind of embodies what I hear from high school students when I speak to them. They feel that older people or old people talk down to them and kind of come across as, put the phone away, stupid. We know we as adults tend to assume that the kids know what to do. They just don't do it because they have no risk factor, and their brains are not fully formed. But I'm here to tell you that we are selling them short, because a lot of these kids come to my training sessions in earnest, on their own, voluntarily, and I give them a lot of credit for that. So, like I say, it's not about lecturing, but it is about training. We have to train, and train some more. The only way to get rid of a bad habit is to replace it with a good habit, and that takes training. But it doesn't have to be painful, as most people think of driver training along the same lines as root canal. Really not the case. It can be fast, fun, and highly effective. And hopefully this webinar will be the same. And it's all about teaching them the why, especially young people. It's not about put the phone away because I say so, because I'm older, because I know better than you. It's about why. Why you have to put that phone away. Because there's no time for texting. These are the 5 essential actions for safe driving. They've been distilled from the 6 core areas of driving. And these 6 core areas account for 9 to 9.5 out of 10 crashes. They are all mental aspects of driving. So when you're doing these 5 essential actions consistently, you have no time to do anything else. You're focused in. And this, by the way, is the exercise that I promised you, is as a way of a simple exercise, as I promised, to kick the distracted driving habit. Use the 5 essential actions. Use them consistently. Sounds like a lot of work. It's not, because what happens is your brain starts to automatically start doing it. When I get behind the wheel, I do it automatically. People that I train, they do it automatically. It's like the same as developing a muscle at the gym. You develop that area of your brain, that instinct, which not only helps you to do this unconsciously, it also helps you to start seeing hazards before they happen. And this is the idea, because your brain is like a camera and it opens up to the possibilities. So the first is check your speed. Okay, you have to consistently check your speed. And the second is to check your space. 2 to 3 seconds on dry pavement, and double that for wet pavement. 3 is scan your mirrors every 3 to 5 seconds, and you have to incorporate what we call triangulation in there. So what this means is you're scanning your driver's side mirror, and then you're looking forward. You triangulate forward. The reason for that is that most of the action is going to happen in front of you. Most of the danger is going to be in front of you, but you need to consistently scope every part of everything around you. So then you look in your rearview mirror and you triangulate forward. Then you look in your passenger side mirror and you triangulate forward. Now you know what's going on in front of you, on the sides of you, and behind you. And you stand a much better chance of being able to avoid a crash, even in the event that someone is looking at their phone or doing something else, getting changed or shaving or whatever they're doing. And if they're about to hit you, you'll see it. And number 4 is to look down the road. Now, we've all heard probably about the move over law. The move over law exists in every state in the union. However, more than half of the people interviewed do not know what it is. So what it means is that anytime you're scanning your horizon 100 yards or so down the road, anytime you see a disabled vehicle, an emergency vehicle, a tow truck, anything in that right shoulder, you need to safely move over one lane, get out of that right lane. Okay, people get hit all the time when they're disabled in the shoulder. It happened just a week ago, right here on the New Jersey Turnpike, but it happens every day. A young man had a disabled vehicle. He was standing too close to it. Someone came up and hit that vehicle and drove it right into him. So you always want to look down the road and move over whenever it's safe. And then the fifth, and very, very important, probably the most important thing next to, well, they're all important. Keep asking, what if? What if a plane drops out of the sky, has to make an emergency landing 3 seconds in front of me? Am I going to be ready to stop? What if a wheel comes off a car that's coming in oncoming traffic, flies over the divider and hits me in the windshield? This actually has happened before. You can see it on YouTube. What if? Stuff happens on the road, and it happens fast. You don't have time to think. You have to react. It's your safe driving habits that will help you get through. Now, our friends at the Virginia Tech Transportation Institute, which is part of Virginia Tech University, did a great study a while back, and they determined that 80% of crashes, distracted driving crashes, occur within 3 seconds of a distraction. Sending or reading a message takes 4.5 seconds on average. So do the math. There's a second and a half that can mean life or death. That's why there is no time for texting. There is nothing that comes out of that phone that could possibly be worth dying for, going to jail for, which is now happening more and more frequently. Reckless drivers are being charged with vehicular manslaughter, being charged with reckless driving, being charged and doing jail time for this. So this can't be worth it. Okay, so let's go to stage one of distraction denial. And that is, I'm a better driver than most. Most people think this. Unfortunately, statistically, it's impossible. The truth is that we all have our bad habits, or we develop bad habits. The key is to know what they are, recognize them, and change them. But most drivers have these habits and either know what they are and just ignore them because they don't understand the consequences. And that's bad. But it's even worse when you don't even know what you don't know. And that's the case in most drivers. And the reason is, quite frankly, it's not the fault of the driver's ed teachers. It is the fault of the driver's ed curriculum and the licensing test. It simply does not teach us how to drive. It teaches, especially our young people, it teaches us how to operate a motor vehicle. That's the physical part. That accounts for 5 to 10 out of 5 to 10% of crashes, whereas driving, the mental aspects of driving, account for 90 to 95% of crashes. So even if you are a better driver than the average, what about the other guy? He is likely to be worse than you are. And he or she is the one who will cause the problem that you need to react to. Now, I have 9 deadly driving myths, and I'm not going to touch on all of them, but I did pull 2 of them out specifically for this. And myth number 3 is, I'm a good driver. Now, I want you to understand that there is a huge difference. You may already understand this, but there is a huge difference between a skilled driver and a good driver. And far and away, the huge majority of people judge a driver and say they're a good driver based on their skill level. That is incorrect. If I ask 1,000 people that question, they will give me 999 wrong answers. The definition of a good driver is a safe driver who is proficient in the 6 key areas of driving that I referred to before. Now, we're not going to touch on all of them today because that's part of a different presentation, but I will at some point make that available to you, and you keep doing your 5 essential actions and you will become a good driver. I can assure you. This is my little buddy who I use for illustration, and Tommy Two Wheels is dynamite behind the wheel. He can spin donuts. He can weave in and out of traffic within inches of other cars. And for the most part, people would say he's a great driver. Well, guess what? He's not, because eventually you end up where Tommy is. When you do this, if you do enough risky behavior, eventually it catches up to you. So driving is not just about causing a crash, it's about preventing a crash. Now, this is the attitude component, which is extremely important. Attitude is the single key. The single most important key to safe driving is attitude behind the wheel. And your attitude of it's not my fault, which many people have, doesn't matter. If a car's coming at me head on, I know how to prevent it. You get your foot off the gas, go to the right every time. Always to the right, always to the right. And I'm not interested at that point in time whether this driver is right or wrong. I know they're wrong. They're coming at me head on. I'm only interested in avoiding that head-on collision, because that is the most deadly form of collision, even with all the new technology in the cars. So if you are a safe driver, you're engaging in hazard perception. That's what the 5 essential actions are all about. You're engaging in looking out for the other driver. You're scanning your mirrors. You're watching your speed. You're watching your space. You're scanning your horizon. You're asking, what if? So what if someone crosses that double yellow line that we all put so much faith into and comes head on at me? Am I ready? Am I ready? Doesn't matter whose fault it is if everyone is in an ambulance headed to the hospital, or worse. The road is an unforgiving place. One mistake can get you hurt real bad. Now, I mentioned before the Berkeley Heights PD, and what prompted me to volunteer to do this, especially for the local towns, is an incident that happened literally around the corner from my home. A 49-year-old driver with a child in the car, presumably his own, was obviously distracted. He got ticketed, multiple tickets for distraction and reckless driving. He drove up on the sidewalk on a 40-mile-an-hour speed limit street. He drove up on the sidewalk and hit a 14-year-old who was walking his dog. The dog and an adult who was with them luckily escaped injury, but he is critically injured. He has been critically injured. We don't know if he will make a full recovery. We can only hope. Regardless of that, he's going to be facing long-term rehab. And all he was doing was he was out walking his dog. And this person who was driving obviously was not paying attention. They were flagged for inattentive driving, whatever you want to call it. It's a classic case. I'm not making judgment here. That's not my place. But it's a classic case of phone use, texting while driving. That's all I can tell you. I've seen it thousands of times, and I can tell you that is what it appears to be. But it could have been a number of other things too. The whole thing is this gentleman is going to lose his license for a period of time, if not permanently, and could very well be facing jail time. And also has to face the conscience, because I believe that people really are good and nobody wants this on their conscience. You don't want the fact that you ran over a 14-year-old on the sidewalk on your conscience. It's going to haunt him. An illustration of that is, this is a recommended reading It was Deadly Wandering, written by a Pulitzer Prize winner who was an old acquaintance of mine. And Matt was also a New York Times best-selling author. He documented the life and recovery, the tragedy and recovery of a young man out of Utah who killed two prominent scientists because he was texting and driving. And this book is all about his struggle to forgive himself and to redeem himself. And he had a very, very long and painful process doing it. And to my understanding, he still struggles with it to this day. This is something you don't want. And if for no other reason, you want to avoid this. And that might be a self-serving reason, but quite frankly, it's for everybody's good. So A Deadly Wandering, you can find it on Amazon. You can find it on Audible. Absolutely recommended reading or listening. So let's jump to myth number 4, which is multitasking. And people think they can do it, especially young people. If you have a human brain, you're not multitasking. You are switching on and off. You can find that a great article at brainfacts.org. It's called The Multitasking Mind. And it's based on a young woman did some great research on it. And it's based on research done by the late Professor Clifford Nass out of Stanford University. And Professor Nass showed that our brains don't multitask, plain and simple. They simply task switch. They do not work simultaneously. They work sequentially. What this means is if you are doing two things at once, you're simply doing two things separately, switching back and forth. And Professor Nass has determined that you're doing, through his studies, that you're doing two things badly. So what he did was he tested people who multitasked all the time. And then he took students that didn't like to multitask, just like to do one thing at a time. And these days, that's kind of a rarity. But what he found was that the heavy multitaskers actually couldn't do the single tasks as well as the people that didn't multitask. So even when he took a multitasker and said, here, just do one thing, they couldn't do it as well as the people that focused on one thing at a time. He concluded that something about multitasking affects the brain permanently. But the ability to focus is key. And again, this is back to attitude, because one of the components of attitude behind the wheel is focus. So let's play a little game. Let's have a little fun with this. You quickly say the alphabet, first 10 letters of the alphabet, A through J, out loud. Then you switch and count out loud from 1 to 10. Now that's two different tasks that you're performing in a row, and they both have different rules, but you know them well. Anyway, you should be able to do it in a few seconds. That's normal. Now try the multitasking version. And the multitasking version is when you do A1, B2, C3 until you finish J through 10. Now notice how you did. Notice where you started to slow down. Usually it's around 5, letter E. Because every time you switch, your brain starts to lose a little bit of track of what it's doing, where it's going, and it slows down a little bit. Professor Nass referred to this as the task switch cost. I refer to it as the task switch delay. And as you know, delay on the road, even a second and a half, can get you killed. So what you have to remember is you can't do two complex things at once. And switching back and forth between two complex things is extremely dangerous, because if you're zigging and zagging, if you zig while the other guy zags, you got problems. So you can walk and chew gum at the same time, at least most of us can, but you can't text and do anything else. And texting and driving are two extremely complex things. And it's very important to understand and this is one thing that's lost on the young people, and that's why I like to get out and talk to them about it. Driving's a lot more complex than we realize. Just look at the 5 essential actions. This is what you're supposed to be doing. Did you know this? No. Did you know that driving is scientific? No, I did not. That's the answer I normally get for people. I did not. How many people think driving is easy? Too many hands go up when I speak to a group. Too many hands go up. They think driving is easy. So you'll hear me say this again later, but if you're bored while you're driving, you're not doing it right. Okay? So driving and talking is a lot more complex than the alphabet and counting or walking and chewing gum. Now, studies show that you're 8 to 23 times more likely to be in a crash if you text, no matter who you are. However, let's actually put some meaning to those numbers, because 8 to 23 times, okay, what does that mean? Well, we've got over 200 million drivers, registered drivers in the US. There are approximately 5 million crashes per year in the US. Now, that was pre-COVID number. That number went way down during COVID, but believe it or not, the actual number of fatalities went up during COVID. In 2021, we had a 16-year high in not rate, in actual fatalities. We're over 42,000. Okay, that's where the misconception comes in. It's not about fatality rate, it's about actual fatalities. We lost over 42,000 people. That's 117 per day in the US, leaving home in the morning, not coming home at night. Now, people look at me like I have two heads when I say that, but that is the reality of it. And thousands more injured, thousands and thousands, roughly 13,000 crashes, statistically almost 6,500, somewhere around 5,500 to 6,000 injuries, many of them serious. So you take that, if you do the math, you take that 5 million divided by 200 million drivers, it gives you a 1 in 34 chance of having a crash within the next 12 months. It might be a very minor crash. Hopefully it's just a little fender bender, but many of them are much more serious. And this is only the age group 20 and up, because the 15 to 20-year-olds, while they only represent 6.5% of registered drivers, they account for over 13% of crashes. So their odds are much worse, about half, 1 in 17. But our odds as adults are 1 in 34. Now, if you even say you're 4 times more likely to crash, that brings your chances of crashing down to 1 in 8.5. Think about that. And let's equate that to a lottery. If you had a 1 in 34 chance of hitting the big jackpot in the lottery, you'd run to the store and buy tickets. If you had a 1 in an 8.5 chance of winning that, we'd have lines around the corner, out the door, everywhere. Everyone would be running for tickets. Unfortunately, in this lottery, the prize is not something we want. So let's go to stage 3, which is a very, very dangerous step. Stage 3 of distraction denial is it's okay to text at stoplights. Now, this is very seductive. This is very tempting, because people will tend to say, oh, okay, stoplight, that's downtime. However, what happens at a stoplight when you do that is you lose all your situational awareness. Now, typing into the phone's texting, reading a phone is texting, it's all the same. But they take your eyes and your mind off what you're doing. And if you try a little exercise, and don't do it on the street, I do not recommend you do it on the street, but try it in a simulated area, like a parking lot where there are no people or other cars around. Close your eyes and count to 4, and then drive straight forward. And you'll see how uncomfortable you get, because your brain hasn't reset. You close your eyes, it went to a different place. And this is what's referred to as situational awareness. And we have to maintain our situational awareness on the road. Dr. Paul Atchley and his colleagues from University of Kansas, they did a very interesting little exercise where they had drivers in a simulator and they asked them to text safely at stoplights. And at the last light, they sent a virtual car right into their lane. Now, 14 of 15 of these folks that were texting failed to notice as they drove into the intersection. On the other hand, the interesting thing is all of the drivers who were attentive, who did not text at stoplights, they all stopped safely. So David Strayer from the University of Utah is another researcher, and he concluded from his studies that it takes your brain up to 27 seconds to get back to what they call baseline attentional capacity, which I call baseline situational awareness. And that's your brain building back up. It needs time. 27 seconds, you're through that intersection. It's too late. It's too late. And that is dangerous. Not only intersections, by the way, are extremely dangerous places. Not only for you and other drivers, but for pedestrians. We are setting records, people, for pedestrian fatalities in the US. And many of you are familiar with this. But we hit over 6,500 for the first time 2 years ago, I believe. And it's just getting worse and worse because you've got pedestrians texting while they're crossing the street. You've got people texting behind the wheel, and that's a deadly combination. And it also includes cyclists. And I ride outside frequently, and I do see people actually, especially young kids, looking at their phones when they're on the bike, not realizing the danger they're in. So we all, this is all about awareness. This is all about conditioning. It can be changed. So here's the lasting effects of mental distraction. And mental distraction, as you see, can last up to 27 seconds, meaning it takes you 27 seconds to reset. So where we're going to stop for today, but our websites are www.stopteendrivingdeaths.org. And for those of you who have young drivers and soon to be drivers, if your kids are 10, 12, you can go there and download a report. My report, it's free. It's called The Parent's Blueprint. It's a step-by-step guide to keeping your teenage driver alive. And I'm proud of that. So it's a short read. It's about 4 pages. And please take advantage of that. Feel free to do so. You can also go to collisionavoidancetraining.com. We've got great information there. It is geared toward employers. So if you are an employer, please download the free report there. It's called the 10 things that every employer must know about motor vehicle safety. And then sackthephone.org, which is all about the 5 essential actions and putting the phone away, why you need to put the phone away when you drive. And I'm going to take some questions here, but if you have any other questions, please feel free to email me, thedrivinggdad@stopteendrivingdeaths.org. That's me, Bob Ragazzo. And text or call me anytime, 908-451-0480. I'm always happy to answer questions, always happy to hear from people with their questions about safe driving. So feel free to do that. And what I'm going to do is take a couple questions now. I know that I threw a lot of stuff at you, so many of you know this. We've got some law enforcement folks with us today. So many of you have been trained as drivers, and I'm pleased about that. But many of us have just, aside from me, I went through driver's ed and I didn't learn how to drive until I was 40 years old. I was in my 40s, and that's when I became an instructor, because I realized I had been driving for decades and did not know how to drive. All I knew how to do was make the car go forward, and eventually it catches up to you. So I've got a question coming in about triangulation. Yes, I expected that. I know it's a foreign concept. This is actually something I did working with some Amazon drivers. And to their credit, they were taught, the management taught them about triangulation. So it makes perfect sense. So I adopt it. We're constantly learning, constantly updating. And by the way, driving is a science, which means it's based on theory. So there are differences of opinion in different training bodies. I am certified by the National Safety Council, among others, but the National Safety Council does not agree with some of my fleet training techniques. And those fleet training techniques are based on extensive research and, quite frankly, make sense. So I teach them regardless of what Safety Council believes. I believe they're wrong. It's up to you to determine what you're comfortable with in terms of techniques. And I'm always happy to debate these things and to answer any questions. But the thing with triangulation, let's deal with that. Triangulation just means looking forward. It's got a lot of different definitions, but in this particular case, what we're talking about is just making sure you look forward as you scan your mirrors. Between every mirror, driver's side mirror, triangulate forward. Rear view, triangulate forward. Passenger side, triangulate forward. Because in my fleet training, I learned about scanning mirrors every 3 to 5 seconds. And I realize as I'm driving that I'm not comfortable unless I'm looking forward as well, because everything's happening in front of you. You don't want to take your eyes off the front of what's ahead of you for 3 seconds. That's dangerous. So quick scan forward, quick scan forward, quick scan forward. Now you know safely. Okay, you're not taking your eyes off the road for any period of time, and you're continuously coming back to that. So that's what triangulation means. It just means scan your mirrors, but look forward in between each scan. Check that side view. Make sure nobody's coming into your lane. I can't tell you how many times, I spend a lot of time on the road. I can't tell you how many times these things have saved my tail, have saved me. I actually saved 2 people the other day from colliding, 2 SUVs, because they both, one came from the right lane, one came from the left lane. Neither one of them understood the failure to yield, which means you do not pull over next to someone. You not change lanes and pull into a lane next to someone. You make sure you're either ahead of them or behind them. And these 2 were coming right for each other. I hit the horn, woke them both up, and they, not trying to pat myself on the back, hopefully they would have noticed, but I don't think they were. And quite frankly, they would have both been right in my lap, because even though I was 3 seconds behind them, we were doing 70. We were doing 65. Oh, sorry, we were doing 55. But we were moving at a good speed. And it would have been a challenge for me to stop at that point. We were in traffic, and traffic was bunched up. And as much as I try to maintain that 2 to 3 seconds, in this particular case, it would have been close. I had my distance, though. Okay, any other questions? None? I must be a brilliant facilitator. It's not true, but please feel free to follow up as you think of anything. And thank you for coming. And make sure you join us tomorrow for the 7 stages of distraction denial, part 2. We'll finish up. We'll have some fun because we're going to take a distraction quiz, and that's always good. It's a great eye opener, and it's a lot of fun. And actually, it'll make you laugh. But it's a serious topic, but we do have to laugh at this stuff at times, as long as we're not in danger. Okay, this is Bob Ragazzo, and I want to thank everybody for coming, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow night for the 7 stages of distraction denial, part 2. Thanks. Take care.